You're listening to the Archetype Effect, conversations redefining power, purpose and leadership for women and the coaches who guide them. I'm Ros Cardinal, leadership coach and creator of the Women's Leader Archetypes. Together we'll explore the real stories, the research and reflections that help women rise with clarity and authentic power. We've spent this season naming things, patterns, movements of power, the ways we step forward, the ways we tighten, the ways we disappear, the ways we hold on. We've walked through vision and withdrawal, drive and sharpness, wisdom and containment, connection and self-erasure. And if you've been listening all the way through, something has probably happened quietly inside you. Recognition. You've heard yourself in certain episodes. You've felt your body respond. You've thought, oh, that's me. Not as a label, as a pattern. And recognition can be destabilising because once you see how your power moves under pressure, you can't unsee it. You notice when you're about to retreat. You notice when your tone sharpens. You notice when you start holding information tighter. You notice when you say yes too quickly. Recognition is powerful, but it's not the end of the story. Because recognition alone can create a new tension. You start monitoring yourself. You think, I'm in Hermit. I'm going Tyrant. I'm being a lone wolf. I'm slipping into Martyr. And if we're not careful, archetypes become another way to evaluate ourselves. Another internal performance. Another way to ask, am I doing this right? That's not integration, that's surveillance. Integration is something different. It's quieter than self-correction. It's more embodied than insight. It's less about stopping patterns and more about widening your range. Living with power after recognition isn't about eliminating your shadows. It's about not being captured by them. And that distinction matters. Across this season, we've explored 4 empowered archetypal energies: sovereign, warrior, wise woman, tribe builder. Not as personalities, as movements of power, autonomy, achievement, influence, connection. When these energies are resourced, power feels spacious. You can step forward, you can step back, you can speak, you can listen, you can hold authority, and you can soften. But under pressure, power narrows. It collapses into one channel. The sovereign retreats into Hermit. The warrior sharpens into the Tyrant. The wise woman contains into the lone wolf. And the tribe builder dissolves into the Martyr. Nothing disappears. Power just loses range. And here's what I want to offer you in this final episode of this season. Integration is not balance. It's flexibility. It's the ability to feel the contraction beginning and not panic, to notice the tightening and not shame yourself, to sense the urge to withdraw or control or overgive and pause long enough to choose. Integration doesn't mean you never go into shadow again. It means shadow becomes information. You don't say, I failed. You say, something in me doesn't feel safe. That single shift changes everything. Because when shadow is information, not identity, your system relaxes faster. And relaxation restores range. Living with power after recognition is not about becoming perfectly regulated. It's about trusting that you can move and return. You can speak firmly and soften later. You can step back and re-enter. You can overstep and repair. You can hold authority and still be relational. Range is the opposite of rigidity, and rigidity is what exhausts women in leadership. Let's make this practical, not in a tactical way, but in a lived way. What does integration actually feel like? It doesn't feel like constant calm. It feels like quicker recovery. You still get activated. You still feel sharpness. You still feel the urge to disappear sometimes. But you come back faster. The hermit no longer keeps you in the cave for weeks. The Tyrant doesn't run the whole project. The lone wolf doesn't hold every piece of context alone. The martyr doesn't say yes to everything. You feel the pull and you can soften it. Integration feels like pausing before sending the email, delegating something even though it makes you slightly uncomfortable, saying, I need a moment to think instead of over-explaining, letting someone else take the meeting and tolerating that they might do it differently, saying no without a 10-minute justification, sharing your unfinished thinking. It feels like tolerating imperfection in yourself and others without collapsing into threat. Integration feels less dramatic, less heroic, less intense, but it feels sustainable. And that word matters because so much of what women call leadership is actually endurance, holding it together, carrying it alone, managing perception, anticipating impact. Integrated power reduces that load. Not because responsibility disappears, but because you stop holding everything in one channel. You don't have to be only strong, only wise, only caring, only visionary. You can move. You can change shape. You can let power circulate rather than compress. There's a fantasy that once you've done the work, you arrive somewhere stable. You become the fully integrated woman, the calm leader, the embodied coach, the wise authority who's no longer reactive. I've never seen that in real life. What I've seen is women with range. Women who still feel contraction but recognise it. Women who still slip up but repair. Women who still tighten but don't stay there. Integration isn't a personality upgrade, it's a relationship shift. You stop fighting your patterns, you stop being shocked by them. You stop building identity around them. You begin to see your archetypal movements a bit like the weather. Sometimes a storm rolls in, sometimes the air clears, sometimes it's steady and bright. But you're not the weather, you're the landscape. That's the difference. When women begin to live this way, something softens. They stop trying to prove they're powerful. They stop trying to prove they're humble. They stop trying to prove they're enough. Power stops being something they manage. It becomes something they inhabit. And inhabiting power feels different to performing it. It feels grounded, less defensive, less urgent. You don't need to assert your authority constantly. You don't need to demonstrate competence constantly. You don't need to earn belonging constantly. You stand. And that standing is quieter than most people expect. Integrated power really looks dramatic. It looks stable. It feels calm. It has gravity rather than sharpness. Let's bring this out of theory, because integration doesn't happen in abstract space. It happens in real rooms, in meetings, in boardrooms, in classrooms, in homes, in coaching sessions, in messy conversations. Living with power after recognition means noticing your body in the moment. The tightening jaw before you interrupt, the sinking feeling before you withdraw, the surge of urgency before you take over, the flutter of anxiety before you say yes. Integration is micro. It's a breath. It's a pause. It's one different sentence. It's letting silence stretch 2 seconds longer than you normally would. It's asking, what would happen if I didn't control this? It's asking, what am I protecting right now? That question, what am I protecting, is one of the most powerful integration tools you have, because every shadow movement is protective. The hermit protects exposure. The tyrant protects failure. The lone wolf protects relevance. The martyr protects belonging. When you recognise what you're protecting, shame drops. And once shame drops, choice becomes possible. Sometimes the choice will still be to act strongly. Sometimes you will still take control. Sometimes you will still step in. Integration isn't about softness, It's about proportion. Is your response aligned to the moment or amplified by an old threat? Living with power means you can ask that question without collapsing. And sometimes you won't catch it in the moment. Sometimes you'll notice later, and that's okay. You'll replay the conversation. You'll feel the sharpness. You'll feel the withdrawal. Integration is also repair. I think I pushed too hard there. I realised I stepped back instead of speaking. I want to revisit that. That's power too. Repair is one of the clearest signs that power has regained range, because defensive power doesn't repair. Integrated power does. It would be easy to end this season on inspiration, but I want to be honest instead. When women don't integrate their power, the cost accumulates. They burn out, they isolate, they overfunction, they shrink. They become indispensable and resentful. They become respected and lonely. They become needed and exhausted. Shadow patterns left unexamined don't explode. They calcify. The tyrant becomes normal. The lone wolf becomes identity. The martyr becomes character. The hermit becomes personality. And then women start telling stories about themselves that aren't true. I'm just intense. I'm just independent. I'm just selfless. I'm just introverted. No, you're adaptive. And adaptation over time becomes distortion if it never gets questioned. Integration interrupts that drift. It says, I don't have to live in one channel. It says, I can be strong without hardening. I can be wise without isolating. I can be caring without disappearing. I can be visionary without retreating. That's not self-help language. That's nervous system freedom. And freedom in leadership is rare, which is why it matters so much. If I zoom out, this entire season hasn't been about archetypes. It's been about safety. What happens to women's power when it feels safe? And what happens when it doesn't? We've talked about the nervous system, about visibility, about responsibility, about influence, about belonging. All of it circles one central question. What does power look like when women are not bracing? Because bracing has become normalised, holding it together, being the competent one, being the strong one, being the thoughtful one, being the connected one. Bracing looks admirable, but it's costly. This season has been an invitation to notice where you brace, not to eliminate it, but to soften it, to widen your range, to remember that power is not a performance. It's an energy that wants to move. And when it moves freely, women lead differently. Not louder, not more aggressively, more coherently. There's less fragmentation, less internal war, less split between strength and softness. Becoming the whole woman isn't about becoming everything at once. It's about allowing movement. And movement requires trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your capacity to recover. Trust that you don't have to be perfect to be powerful. If you've listened to all 13 episodes, I want you to pause for a moment. Not to evaluate what you've learnt, but to notice what you've recognised. What felt true in your body? What made you uncomfortable? What made you exhale? That's your data, not a personality result, not a label, recognition. Living with power after recognition is not about fixing yourself into some ideal leader. It's about inhabiting yourself more fully, letting your power move, letting it soften, letting it strengthen, letting it rest, and trusting that you can hold all of it. Not perfectly, but consciously. That's integration. And integration is not a finish line, it's a practice, a returning, a widening, a remembering. This season has been about naming patterns. What comes next in your life, in your leadership, is about living with them. Not as constraints, as information, as movement, as range. And if there's one thing I hope you carry forward, it's this. There's nothing wrong with your power. There's only the question of how safely it gets to move. And that's something you can begin noticing today. Quietly, without drama, just one breath at a time. If this season has done anything, I hope it's given you permission not to become someone new, but to come home to the full range of who you already are. Your power was never the problem. The bracing was. And bracing can learn to soften. You don't need to perform strength or mute it or apologise for it. You can let it move. Let it rest. Let it return. That's integration, not arrival, but inhabitation. I'm Ros Cardinal, and that's where real leadership begins. Thanks for joining me on the Archetype Effect. If this episode sparked an insight, share it with a woman who leads, or leave a review so more women can find these conversations. Until next time, lead with purpose and power that feels like you.